I'd like to welcome you back to our study on the life of Joseph. This is the last study that we're going to be touching on. I call this one Feed My Lambs because I think it's important for us to remember what all this is coming to. And this will really bring us back to the very beginning of our study. And so we're going to keep on in our story. We're in Genesis 46, and we're going to read part of 46 and part of 47. If you want to read the whole story, you can go back and read that whole story. I'm just touching on the parts that are the most important and also the parts that we probably haven't yet touched on. And so here we are going to start off in Genesis 46, verses 1 through 7. And it says, And Israel took his journey with all that he had, and came to Beersheba, and offered sacrifices unto the God of his father Isaac. If we remember in our story, Joseph's brothers came down to Egypt to buy food during the second year of the hardship. And when they came down, they brought down Benjamin. Joseph revealed himself, who he was, and told them to go home and call all of their families down to Egypt because he would take care of them. And so his brothers went back. They told his father Jacob, Joseph's actually still alive. He's actually the main guy in Egypt. And he's asked us all to come down to Egypt to take care of us. This is going to begin the third year. This is the end of the second year. And so in the first 2 years, Jacob has to take care of his family. His family has to take care of themselves. But beginning in this third year, they all come down to Egypt. And so Jacob's on his way. If we remember, Joseph sent wagons and horses and whatnot to bring all of their belongings. Verse 2, And God spake unto Israel in a vision of the night, and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here am I. And he said, I am God, the God of thy fathers. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will surely bring thee up again. And Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. And Jacob rose up from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, and the little ones, and their wives, in their wagons, which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. And they took their cattle and their goods, which they had gotten in the land of Canaan, and came to Egypt, Jacob and all of his seed with him, his sons and his sons' with him, his daughters and his daughters' daughters, sons' daughters, and all his seed brought he with him into Egypt. And so we have Jacob coming on down to Egypt, and he stops to verify with God, am I doing the right thing? Because you have given us a land of our inheritance, but there is a problem, and are we doing the right thing? And so he does a sacrifice, and God comes to him in a dream and speaks to him and says, don't worry, go on down to Egypt. Joseph will take care of you. And what I find really interesting in verse 3 is this words when he says, fear not to go down to Egypt. But more than that, he says, for I will there make of thee a great nation. And so God is going to begin this transformation process that will create Israel as we know it in the rest of the Old Testament. But it's beginning, its growth. God is making this all happen while it's in Egypt. This is a very important point in time, both for Jacob and his family, and for us as a people looking at this passage in a prophetic way. Jacob and his family needed to survive the first 2 years of the famine. But at this moment in time, God, through Joseph, brings Jacob and all of his family into Egypt, where Joseph takes over, taking care of them. And they begin their transformation into a great nation. This will also be our time to shine. As God begins to build up his nation of true believers, God tells Jacob to fear not. And I think this is important because oftentimes when we look at end times events, we look at apocalyptic events. We look at things that are happening that maybe are scary, destruction, violence, and we always think of it as something we never want to participate in. But one of the important things to remember when God is bringing all of this to pass is he's cleaning up his kingdom. And this is what it tells us in the parable of the wheat and the tares. God says that he will clean up all those things that, cause us to stumble from his kingdom. And this is what's happening. And this is why he tells Jacob, fear not. There's a transformation going to be happening here, and I'm going to be turning you into a great nation. And we have another piece to this prophecy in Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. And the word that Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the tops of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And this is important because this mountain of the Lord's house shall be established is his kingdom. This is what this is all about. It's to establish his kingdom on this earth. But his kingdom cannot be established if the world at large hates God. And so he has to clean this world up and leave it with the more righteous people and his people. From what there, he can begin establishing this next phase. And this is important because it also says in the end of verse 2, all nations shall flow unto it. This isn't just Israel. This isn't just, one nation or another. This is all focusing on God's kingdom. And we read verses 3 through 5 in that same passage. And many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. O house of Jacob, come ye, and let us walk in the light of the Lord. And so we have this complete transformation of the world as we know it. People are coming up to God's kingdom to learn of his ways, to learn of his laws, to learn of his paths. We have to remember this world belongs to God. He made it. It's his creation. And oftentimes we've abused it. We've abused it in our efforts to survive, in our creation of the very things that we want and need for life. We oftentimes have not taken into consideration the kingdom, the planet, and everything that God has made. Oftentimes in our ambition to achieve money and power and wealth, we've chopped down entire forests or tore up the ground or ruined the soil. And of course, there's consequences to that, and we're seeing those today. A lot of people, of course, it's a big to talk about climate change and whatnot, and there's a whole lot of climate change that's just hot air, but there are some real things. When you think about landfills, when you think about how we've destroyed the soil by putting too many chemicals and chemical fertilizers on it, there's a part of climate change that is a reality. We have not taken care of the planet God has given us, and there needs to be a mind change. We need to rebuild the soils. We need to rebuild the world that we live in as though it was something precious to take care of, not something to worship. It's not an idol. It's something precious to take care of for us, for our children, for our children's children, for generations to come, if it so be 1,000 years. And that's the change that we have to have mentally. It's not that God wants us to have a miserable life, but he wants us to think about what we're doing. If we're going to create something, if we're going to build something, consider the long-term effects of what we're about to do. And so he says in verse 4, he shall judge among the nations, and he will rebuke many people. And there's just going to be a change. Today, a lot of nations focus on warfare. Soldiers and patriotism and all these things, guns and whatnot. But there's a change here. And if guns are a major part of our life, then we have to think about what it's going to take for us to get into this kingdom. If I can't live without guns, if I can't live without all of those things, then I'm not going to find a happy place in God's kingdom. It says here, they will not learn about war anymore. These things are going behind us, and there's a mentality change. And this is pretty important. And so it says in verse 5 in the last part, let us walk in the light of the Lord. This is the change that he's asking of us. Not to walk in our own light, in our own wisdom, in our own intelligence, but to walk in God's light, the light of truth. And this is important. Let's continue in Genesis. We're in verses 28 through 31. And he sent Judah before him unto Joseph, to direct his face unto Goshen. And they came into the land of Goshen, and Joseph made ready his chariot, and went up to meet Israel his father, to Goshen, to present himself unto them, to him. And he fell on his neck, and wept on his neck a good while. And Israel said unto Joseph, Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. And Joseph said unto his brethren, and unto his father's house, I will go up and shew Pharaoh, and say unto him, My brethren in my father's house, which were in the land of Canaan, are come unto me. And so in this story, remember, in the course of our study in the life of Joseph, one of the important factors is to always remember Joseph is the typification of Jesus Christ in the story for us prophetically today. And so there's this moment in verse 28 where Judah is being built up and being sent before to open the way or as a sign for what is about to happen. Joseph is about to show himself to his family, all of them. And this is important. I don't know to what extent this part about Joseph is going to play out in these last days. But I do find it very interesting if you followed the history in these latter days of the house of Israel in the Middle East. Of course, we know in 1948 they were reestablished as a nation. And from that point forward, like clockwork, more and more things have happened. They regained Jerusalem. Jerusalem was recognized as their capital. God has been putting Judah kind of as a sign for the nations that this is his work that is being done. And so Joseph comes down, shows himself to his brother, and then he's going to go up and speak to Pharaoh about him. Verse 32 through 34, And the men are shepherds, for their trade hath been to feed cattle. And they have brought their flocks and their herds, and all that they have. And it shall come to pass, when Pharaoh shall call you, and shall say, What is your occupation? That ye shall say, Thy servant's trade hath been about cattle, from our youth even until now, both we and our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. And so, as we're coming in, our story here, Joseph is explaining to his family, when you go before the Egyptians, tell them you're shepherds. This is important in a couple different facets. Where Joseph's family is about to live in Egypt is probably one of the best areas, the most fertile areas. They're going to be blessed in this area, and of course God is creating out of them a great nation. And this is important. But there's a double part to this in that God's people today are shepherds. The world hasn't really cared about shepherds in the sense of teaching that which is good and right and just and moral. They don't really care for the most part. But here, Joseph is telling his family, make sure you tell them you are shepherds. And I think about Jesus' word to Peter in John chapter 21, verse 15 through 17. So when they had dined, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? He saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. And he said unto him, Feed my lambs. And I think this is really the typification of God's people. The world is just charging forward, doing whatever they want to do, whatever feels good. But there has to be someone who's teaching truth, someone who's teaching morality, someone who's teaching what's good and right in this world. Obviously, if the whole world turned into, depraved humans, the world would destroy itself. And so there needs to be someone in this world who are shepherds. Verse 16, And he said unto him again the second time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? And he saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. And he saith unto him, Feed my sheep. And so God's focusing on Simon Peter and telling him the importance is that you feed the lambs, that you feed the sheep, that you are there aside from your own desires, your own pleasures, your own needs and wants, that you are there to feed the people in the spiritual sense, in the truths of God. Verse 17, He saith unto him the third time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Peter was grieved, because he said unto him a third time, Lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Lord, thou knowest all things. Thou knowest that I love thee. Jesus said unto him, feed my sheep. And of course, the purpose here is to kind of drill home this point. Your life is wrapped up in feeding the lambs and the sheep of God. This is a kingdom of shepherds. This is the line of Jacob that's coming down in. They are a people who are shepherds. And that's what God has made of his church, the true church today. We are meant to be a people of shepherds. We are attempting to shepherd the people in the right way, keeping them away from dangers of this world, attempting to teach them the right things. That doesn't mean everyone listens, but we have a very important aspect in this world. Let's go on to Genesis chapter 47, verses 1 through 5. And Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, My father and my brethren and their flocks and their herds and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan. And behold, they are in the land of Goshen. And he took some of his brethren, even 5 men, and presented them unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto his brethren, What is your occupation? And they said unto Pharaoh, Thy servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. They said moreover unto Pharaoh, For to sojourn in the land we are come. For thy servants have no pasture for their flock, for the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. Now therefore we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, Thy father and their brethren are come unto thee. And so they come down, and now Pharaoh is meeting the leaders of the family. And, of course, like Joseph said, they're telling him we're shepherds. And as we remember in the previous studies, we'd mentioned that archaeologists have discovered what they believe happened during this period of 7 years, and that it wasn't a dry period, a drought in Egypt. And this is important because Joseph's family, Jacob and all of his family, they have no pastures. They're coming down to Goshen because of the abundance of water. There is still places there to pasture animals. And this is another piece in that puzzle. Let's continue on. Verse 6 through 11. The land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and brethren to dwell. In the land of Goshen let them dwell. And if thou knowest any men of activity among them, then make them rulers over my cattle. And so in come their family, and the Pharaoh looks and says, okay, these are all shepherds. They can't be with my people. Put them all over here in Goshen, the best of the land, the best of all areas that are in our land. And then he also says, okay, now out of your family, look for those that are really active, those are really bright, and they're going to watch over some of my people also. And so you have this spreading of power. God is already at work making Jacob and his family a great nation. Verse 7, And Joseph brought in Jacob his father, and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, How old art thou? And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers, and the days of their pilgrimage. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh, and went out from before Pharaoh. And Joseph placed his father and his brethren, and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, and in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And this is important again because it's tying in where they were going to be, this land of Goshen, this land that was called the land of Ramses, even before the king, the Pharaoh Ramses, existed farther on in time. But another interesting piece here is that Jacob comes in and blesses Pharaoh. And I think this is interesting as I reflect back on Granville Hedrick's dream that he had, which we also shared in the course of this study. You can go back and read it if you've forgotten about it. But one of the things that he saw when he saw the destabilization and the destruction of the United States as we know it, he saw this group of liberty and freedom-loving people stand up and join with the saints of God. And I see that in this little picture here where Jacob is blessing the Pharaoh. And you see this coming together of Egypt and Jacob. And it's just an interesting concept there to put in. But Second Nephi chapter 8 verses 18 and 19, we have this confirmation of what we already read in Isaiah. It says, "And it shall come to pass in the last days when the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains." Mountain here, of course, is speaking of nation. Not necessarily nation as we might interpret it, Honduras, Mexico, United States, something like that. But this is a governing body. This is a big governing body, and it'll be on top of all governing bodies, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it. And many people shall go and say, "Come ye, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." And as we already had in this passage multiple times, what does it tell us? Tell us the way of the Lord is? The way of the Lord is to be shepherds. It is to tend the lambs, especially, and also tend the sheep, to watch over them. And as we see events unfolding in these last days, we see that there's a lot of people, government officials, churches, that are being crushed. Why? Because they did not protect the sheep, and more especially, they did not protect the lambs. And Genesis 47, verse 12, "And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all of his father's household with bread according to their families." And so those first 2 years they had to survive buying grain from Egypt. Now Joseph brings them in to Goshen, the best land anywhere, and Joseph takes care of them. This is very interesting. John chapter 10, verse 16, Jesus said, "Another sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd." And this is what it's all about for Jesus, bringing the sheep in, bringing them together. There needs to be one fold, and of course that one shepherd is him, Jesus Christ himself, as it is Joseph in our story here. And he's taking care of his family, and Jesus will take care of his family, as we've read in other passages in 3 Nephi chapter 10, when Jesus says, "And I will be with them," or "I will be amongst them." And that's just, that's what we're looking for. This isn't just a horrific story of apocalypse. This is a story of the shepherd coming to his sheep, being with them, and blessing them in the best of the land. And of course, this brings us eventually full circle back to where we began. With Genesis 37, 8, and 9, when Joseph began to have his first visions. And the second one that he shares, just going to read here, 8 refers obviously to his first vision, but I think it ties in well with everything we've gone through in this study. And then, of course, verse 9 is his second vision. It says, "And his brethren said unto him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us?" And, of course, literally that happened. Joseph reigned over them. "Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us?" And as we've talked about, Jesus, when he comes, will have dominion over all the earth, over all nations. And it says, "And they hated him yet more for his dreams and for his words." Joseph's brothers didn't understand the broader picture, the bigger picture that God was trying to bring around. They were thinking of it purely from the perspective of brothers and, our little brothers trying to usurp authority over us and take over the inheritance and whatnot. But God had a bigger picture in mind here. He was looking at events not only in their lives in the future, but he was looking at events all the way to the end of time. And verse 9, "And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it to his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me." And of course, as we mentioned in the beginning, when we talked about this dream, this more than anything really points to Jesus Christ. Everything in the universe is making obeisance to him in every way. The Word of God, the church, even the nations of the world are making obeisance to Jesus Christ. And that's what the story is about. The story is about us recognizing Jesus Christ, going to him, trusting in him, even in the most dire of circumstances, going to him and trusting that he will take care of us. He will direct us, and he loves us. One of the important things that I think about when we're wrapping this up, of course, is I think about Joseph when he was testing his brothers. We remember that Jesus was crucified by his family. And Joseph likewise was sold into slavery by his family. And so when his family came back, Joseph was testing them, trying them to see if they still had the same heart. If they knew it was him, would they think about money or whatever? Again, had they really repented, had they really changed? And I think a lot of the things that are happening in our day today are those same kind of trials and temptations. Jesus is again trying his family. When I come the second time, will there be anyone here that doesn't want to crucify me a second time? Will there be real people here that love me and are waiting for me, and I can build a country, a nation with? And so this is what this is coming to. And of course, the end of the story began at the beginning when it said, "Everything made obeisance to me." And I think that's an important thing. That's kind of the end of our story of Joseph. I know that there's more story in there, but that's kind of the end of the story that God kind of put in my heart to bring out. The whole passage of our time prophetically, not just Joseph's story, but all the way up to the end, through the difficult times, and to the time when Jesus Christ establishes his kingdom, a great nation in this world, a nation above all nations, a mountain above all mountains, and he is there to take care of his people, hold us in his arms, wipe away our tears, and reign with us for a long time. Hope this blesses you and inspires you. God bless and have a wonderful day.